Hey there, welcome to the Growth Whisperers, where everything that we talk about is building enduring great companies, companies that last, companies that you actually enjoy working at and running and being a part of. Of course, if you're burnt out, you're not going to be able to
enjoy anything.
enjoy anything, right? That's a part of it that's not fun. This is episode 2 of 2 about executive burnout. If you haven't, we encourage you strongly to listen to episode 162 about executive burnout. But I've talked enough. Kevin, hello, my co-host. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thankfully, I'm not burnt out at the point. I've been burnt out many, many times.
Yeah.
But I'm actually, things are great. Excited to be doing this episode. This is deep, deep in my heart and passion, talking about burnout, preventing burnout, recovering from burnout. Is this just, it's been part of my life and lots of the people I work with. So, yeah.
Well, you wrote a book about this, didn't you? So normally at this point, I'd say, what's your word of the day? But I'm going to ask you something different, right? I want you to tell me about Elvis Presley, right? And you and I, oh yeah, okay, you weirdo. What are you talking about? No, you and I were at a place, and I remember you telling me a story about Elvis Presley. Maybe you could share that with us as a different way to start the episode.
Which story would that be? About the story of his life or the story of my childhood home?
Of your childhood home.
Yeah. So when I grew up, people talk about being fans of different musicians. So if you could imagine my childhood home, and I grew up in the 70s, and in my childhood home, we had our dining room where we'd have our, fancy meals, and we had family over, and it had the old 70s velvet wallpaper with the kind of diamond-like designs, and it was, velvet, like golden velvet wallpaper, if you could imagine. And we were like, we didn't live in a fancy house by any means, but we had nice wallpaper. But we had a spectacular piece of art, and there was only one piece of art in the dining room, and that was a mirrored, framed picture of Elvis Presley. And that was the only thing in our dining room. Some people would have a picture of a relative or maybe even, a landscape, but ours was Elvis, because my family was deep, deep, deep Elvis fans. Actually, to some point early in my life, my friends that were really, their family, where their religious beliefs were core to their family, they would have pictures of the God that they believed in or their beliefs up on their wall. And there's a part of me that wondered for a while if we believed in Elvis Presley, but so he was a figure. And that's why in my world, when Elvis Presley ended his life early in 1977, when I was a 7-year-old child, it hit me real hard, because I was like, we idolized this guy. Yeah. And he was rich, and he was famous, and he had an airplane, and he was an amazing performer, and he had it all in my naive childhood eyes. And I was confused of why he would, tap out early in life. And that kind of got me onto this talk of thinking about, what does it take to like thrive in your career and have a great life too, and want to stay alive even. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, there's no doubt that Elvis Presley, he was one of the first. He blazed a lot of trails in the entertainment industry, and his suffering, for multiple reasons, his suffering was immense. Okay. But it's I bring it up as a way to change the start of the podcast, because this is an example of what we're talking about here. Last time it was executive burnout. When do you know it's time to get help? This time it's building your resilience, because frankly, we don't want anyone to end up in the misery and the terrible, tragic end, which, let's be fair, it took years to play out. With Elvis or anyone else that you can name.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's like the deep secret of the boardroom, where some people get to the point where their burnout gets the best of them, like happened to Elvis. It was cumulative over time, but it happens to lots of people. It's quite common. I mean, one of the companies we work with, we lost a key exec, and it was incredibly sad, obviously horrible for them and their family, and and lots of others have been close. It's a real serious issue, and
Yeah.
we want to talk about this. Today's episode is more about the prevention piece.
Yeah. Yeah. In our research for this episode, we went to the definition of resilience versus strength. And
Mhm.
it's a great way to get an idea of what we're talking about here. So strength is defined as the ability to withstand a great force. Okay, but resilience is the ability to recover quickly from damage. Everybody experiences mental health issues to some degree. Resilience, how do we build our resilience? It's the ability to recover quickly from that damage. Damage will always happen. How do we recover quickly? And that's the topic that's there.
Mhm.
So I know how close this is to your heart. You wrote a book about it. You spend a lot of time speaking about it, and it certainly is to me as well. It's our ability to recover from the issues that we experience that matters.
Yes.
It's so important.
It's almost like elasticity of an elastic. The stronger and more and better that the rubber in the elastic, or whatever's in elastics these days, the more that it can bend, and basically, it can, be pushed and come back. At a
Yeah,
certain point, it breaks. And we're trying to keep the idea from breaking, which is almost like burnout. And, our own resilience, or ability to bounce back, is like a muscle. There's things that you can do to train it and get better at it. And that's what a lot of, personal growth and executive growth is about. And sometimes that happens naturally just through the work you do. You build more resilience throughout your life.
yeah,
Sometimes you need some additional help, and sometimes there's things that actually reduce your resilience. So no matter what, if you're building an enduring great company, you're going to need more resilience as you continue to grow, because you'll have to handle bigger things, not only in the business, but then stuff in life happens. And
it's the thing that people don't anticipate as they're growing. The more that you grow your business, the more complex challenges come your way.
yes, yeah, the bigger the company, the bigger the challenges, and they have more zeros attached to them,
Yeah,
or more consequences, or more lives, depending on the business that you're in. And no different than a power lifter, if we're just looking at the strength side, going to lift more and more weight. Well, you need more muscles in all of your body to be able to handle that. And same thing for, leaders and companies. You just need more resilience to handle all the stuff that gets thrown at you. So, and
yeah,
the definition, it's ability to recover or bounce, another term for it. So the main thing is resilience is a preventative measure, and it helps you to feel good and mentally be well and happy. But still, as we talked about in the last episode, we're all one or two life events away from getting pushed into a place where we need some mental health help, where we get
yeah,
into the orange or red zone. So no matter what you do, you'll be able to handle more, but there's still things that could put you in jeopardy, and that's okay.
yeah,
We just want to make it harder and less frequent that we could get pushed over the edge mentally.
yeah.
And that's what this episode's about.
So we made the point, I just want to reiterate it. We made the point last week that executives are often more driven than the average person. So this mental health, executive burnout, building your resilience topic is, we encourage, more appropriate for our audience than the average person. The second point, or as we zoom out, before we start to go through some key points here, this is a job that must be done. Okay, simply knowing,
Yes.
there's been a burnout event, yeah, it'd be good to build my resilience, and then going back and watching TV is not going to solve it. This is a job that you've got to do unless you work on this stuff. It may occur organically, but you won't build your resilience, especially if you're in a scaling business. I
Yes,
guess,
absolutely.
yeah,
It's critical, and it's almost like if you were an electric car, the job that must be done is you got to plug it in and charge it up.
yeah,
And we know that. Unfortunately, we kid ourselves into believing that, even though the car's got a 500-kilometer range, we're just going to take it for 700 and see what happens. We wouldn't do that with an electric car, but we do with ourselves. And the idea of resilience is always keeping yourself charged up,
Yeah.
not letting yourself deplete, not driving from Los Angeles to San Diego on 50 kilometers of range. We wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But often that's what we try and expect of ourselves. And shockingly, it doesn't work out most of the time when we overdo it for too long.
Yeah. So a couple of quick points before we dig in. I guess for me, one of the things that I've found in building resilience is a line in the sand. And the line would be Stephen Covey's circle of influence versus circle of concern. In other words,
Yeah.
there are things that concern us, and the examples he uses, the sex life of celebrities or politicians' latest antics or what's on TV or whatever else. There are things that concern us, but there is also things that we can influence. So in terms of building your resilience, just on any topic that comes across your radar, knowing, is this a part of my circle of concern or is this a part of my circle of influence? So that's the first point. The second point I'd make, sometimes just saying to yourself, in 1 year's time, this thing that's eating me up, that's concerning me so much, it won't be a big deal.
Yes.
And being able to be at peace with the fact this thing will pass. It doesn't matter what it is, this thing will pass is a very good way to think about building that resilience. So having said that, Kev, I'd like to talk about your Oxygen Mask first, your book, because this is about building these habits.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing I want to talk about, like in your example you gave, is excellent and logical. The problem is when your brain is in that red zone mentally, we talked about the last issue, when you're really, really in a bad place.
Yeah.
Our brain has bad thoughts.
Yeah.
And the ability to be optimistic and hopeful almost disappears to the point where people at that point, like they need to build their mental health and resilience so bad they can't see positives anymore, and that's why it's so darn risky.
Yeah.
So, but there's a few chapters in the book, and the book is basically an entire book about resilience. And the model of the book is simply that people talk about work-life balance, which is very cute, but what they leave out of the equation is self. And self is the power source, the battery of the car, essentially, in that metaphor, and that's you and your own resilience. And you make things happen at work, and you make things happen in life. And we often, this is about neglecting ourselves and keeping ourselves charged up. So we just pulled some of the key chapters out to talk about. And the first one is the chapter called Double Your Resilience. And the root of it, and this is the specific focus on resilience, the others are secondary or influencing, is making time for what we call your resilience rituals. What are the things you do that charge you up? For your body, your mind, and your spirit. And so I'll give you an example. So like this morning, it's a Monday when we're recording this, I got up, I got outside and got some exercise. That is one of my resilience rituals. Yeah. Then I also had some time to write this morning before I started my meeting. It's another one of my resilience rituals. And last night, I spent a couple hours preparing my plan for the week. So my action list, that's another one of my resilience rituals. So weekly, prepare the action list, which is for my brain. In the morning, exercise, which is for my body and my brain, actually, and a bit of my spirit too, because it elevates me.
Yeah.
Action plan for my brain. And then for spirit, I had a whole bunch of time with my kids on the weekend. And last week I had some extra time to go do an experience with some friends in Los Angeles. So there's and I've got time playing with my friends at the racetrack coming up in a month or in the next month. So body, mind, and spirit, charging those different parts of yourself. And if you just do the body, that's great, but it's not enough. And if your mind is important, but that's not enough. The spirit is kind of the thing that keeps you inspired and connects you to purpose and connection with other people. And if you do those things regularly, it makes a really, really so that's for me. When I do those things consistently, things are good. And when I don't do them, things don't go as well. It's almost like my chart comes down a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Make time for yourself. Yeah. So for me, I guess I exercise every day, 30 minutes to an hour. And I switch between high intensity, a range of things that works really well for me. There's also saunas and meditation and some things like that help to get me to refocus. Clearly, there's also time with the family and a lot of time with friends, a lot of that type of stuff. And to be honest, also, it's this podcast, just being able to riff and talk garbage
Yeah.
with you on a regular basis. So let's move on to the next one from Your Oxygen Mask first.
Yeah. Invest in your sweet spots, chapter 4. And the idea is a sweet spot is work you love to do and you're really good at it. And you do it in the environment in which you like to do it. So it's basically, if you do it right and you spend 80% of your time doing work that you love to do and you're good at the way you love to do it, your work will give you energy. When you're drained by your work, look, a 12-hour day will drain most people. But in a regular-ish day, if you're drained by your work, you're probably doing the wrong work. And as senior leaders, we can modify our roles or build a different team to suit us. So for example, one of the things that will absolutely zap and drain my energy is anything to do with forms, administration, or anything like that whatsoever. Just, it absolutely zaps me. But yet, I will work with CEOs and executives with the most challenging problems in a second.
Yeah.
Someone says they have a big challenge they want to work through or a big opportunity they want to brainstorm around. I'm all in 24/7. Call me. But administration stuff, like I can't get away from it fast enough. So in my world, if 80% of my time is spent doing that, I've got infinite energy. And so to give an example, a CEO I worked with, long story short, had a bit of an issue with dealing with some people. And when it came to letting people go, drove him crazy. He didn't like it, ended up creating issues, and had a lot of lawsuits in their organization from dismissals.
Yeah.
And it drained him. And so we had a conversation. I said, well, why do you get involved? He's like, and he had a whole story about why. But I said, at the end of the day, if you don't like it, and based on a number of lawsuits, you're not very good at it, right? Why don't you get somebody else? And it was an epiphany. So he got someone else to get involved in these, and he had zero to do with it. First of all, he didn't have to be burdened by that in his day. Second of all, he had a lot less lawsuits, which took away further burden from his system. And again, it's not rocket science. It's just don't do the things you don't want to do. And whatever you don't like doing, somebody else loves doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's basic, but you need to give yourself permission.
So you got to have something in the battery to be resilient. If you're depleted from just day-to-day normal operating, if your battery is depleted too much, then you're not going to be able to withstand those forces. So what have we got next? Something about toads.
Yeah, the next one's called Lick Your Toads. Basically, it's all the loose ends or incomplete things in your world, mentally or physically, that burden you. There's a story about it in the book. But basically, it's the things that you think about regularly, you get pinged with guilt or dread, but you don't do them. And truly, in the time you've spent thinking about them, the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, you could have got them done. Yeah. And what I found and through my work on this, and I used to do a lot on this years ago, is most people have 30 to 50 of these loose and incomplete things. And it could be a squeak, like right now in my place here, in the shower in the master, the silicone, it's starting to discolor. And I know I need to get it done. And I've got to get some pictures that are beside me hung up. I got to get some pictures redone and hung up in my office. And the thing is, if you don't care and you don't notice it, it's one thing. But when you think it's burning cognitive energy, these are low value issues. really in the big scheme, but almost like from a feng shui perspective, they clog up your life if you believe in feng shui, and if you don't, principle's still the same. So, for example, so I had a leader that was a partner in a professional services firm. They had 150 of these, which is not uncommon.
Yeah.
And they all just created huge amounts of mental friction and energy wasted on low value distractions that kept them from being as effective as they could in their job, never mind the amount of stress. And so if you want to have more resilience, have less friction. And imagine walking down the street to your place of work, or go to see your friends or family with 150 toads stacked up on you that you're carrying all that extra weight. It's just brutal.
Ineffective. Yeah.
It's unnecessary burden, but it's like you got to do. It's basically, it becomes like spring cleaning for your mind and getting the stuff out.
So if the last one was infinite energy generation, is what you described it. So you've got to have something in the battery at the end of the day. And this one is about the things that are draining your battery, the little things. Then the next one, dealing with your emotional junk, is also about the things that are draining your energy.
Correct.
Or things that are, I guess, long-term things rather than the silicon in the shower, things that are draining your energy.
Yeah, because they're just deep in your operating system. And this is just unpacking those triggers. So basically, we've all, everyone is healing from something or suffering from something. We've all got issues that bother us. And we're not trying to be perfect humans, but we have issues that tend to show up and get in the way. Our emotional baggage acts out in our modern day life and gets in the way. So for example, one executive that I work with, and they're probably the most challenging executive I work with. And they just can't help but be an asshole.
Yeah.
Like they're like the dog that needs to go piss on top of the other dog's urine to stake their territory.
Yeah.
He can't help himself.
Yeah.
And as a person, I like him as a person, and and he's, we've got a whole bunch of the right things, but he just can't help but continually be an asshole and be overly difficult.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what he's talking about, if he has a counselor, if he's talking to his counselor, but I sure know that it definitely regularly shows up, and it regularly he gets in his own way. And unfortunately, he gets in the way of a lot of other people.
And that's the point. He gets in his own way, because if we go back to the last episode where we're saying, when do you know that you need to get some help? Executive burnout, there are things that can be long-term challenges. Maybe it was a divorce or a loss, or you got fired, or you had a fight. I don't know. There could be things that are stuck there that are making you making you act in a certain way, that are leading to your unhappiness and acting out. So you've got to get these things sorted out.
Yes. Well, and here's the thing. If everywhere you go, you run into assholes, you're probably the asshole. And I've had my own versions. I can be pretty fiery. But at the end of the day, if everywhere you go you run into crooks, look in the mirror. Yep. Right? If everywhere you go there's people who are overly dramatic, like no matter what that is, and we all have our things. I'm not perfect. I can still get intense, and people might call me an asshole at times, although I try not to. But it's internal triggers in our own junk that gets in our way and creates unnecessary consequences for ourselves and others. So deal with your emotional junk, go see your therapist, continually clean out the things that get in your way, so you can, one, feel better inside, and two, also be more effective. And you'll know what those are because they keep coming up.
Okay. So then the last one that we've got is making yourself useless. Tell us about that one, Kev.
Yeah. Well, it's truly what our job is as a leader, is to build a team so strong that there's not much we need to do. And most people suffer from a less than ideal team. Yeah. Because it's hard. It's the hardest part of business, dealing with the people stuff. Today we had to, last few days, we had to deal with somebody in a company that just wasn't cutting it, and was an awesome person who we really, 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 really liked. Really good person. Just wasn't up to the task. And those are hard changes to make.
Yeah.
So the idea is it's normally the team either gives you energy or takes energy. It's one of the other. So if you want to have a lot of resilience, have an amazing team. Or if you want to improve your resilience, if you got a bad one, at least get it to neutral.
Yeah.
And just story after story, but the root of it is build the team that you want and that you would dream to have. It'll free you up and give you energy, because most of what drains you at work is the people around you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the customers. Customers can be, it's interesting. We have a place that is in a community where things are rented out over the summer. It's a place that we don't use a lot, so it gets rented out. And we have a list in the community of the people not to rent to. And for whatever reason, I stumbled on it the other day. And guess what? Every single one of these people had in common.
They were an arsehole?
Yeah, generally they were painful.
Yeah.
And for all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So they were customers that you didn't want to have to work with, no different than team members you don't want to have to work with. But this one's about team. It's just, and today I was just talking to a CEO about a new exec on a team that the CEO has. And they're going, my gosh, it's so much easier.
Yeah.
It says, never mind the quality of the work, the thinking. We're talking about things like that are strategic and adding value to the converse. Never mind the work and the issues. The conversation has changed dramatically in a very meaningful way.
Yeah. 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 It matters. Awesome. Yep. Okay. So building your resilience. We know executive burnout is a problem. We know that this is a job to be done. Unless you work on it, you won't build your resilience. I would strongly recommend, if this is a topic you're interested in, that you buy/read Kevin's book, Your Oxygen Mask First, by Kevin Lawrence. It's a topic that not many authors have touched on, and you've done a great job there. So thank you for that work, Kev. So to quickly summarize, we've got to know it's a job to be done, and it's not going to get done in a few days. So what we covered off here was doubling your resilience, investing in your sweet spots, licking your toads, dealing with your emotional junk, and making yourself useless. So anything else to add there, Kev, before we close? No,
it's just that you deserve to take good care of yourself and make it preventative versus reactionary. It's always worse when you do it reactionary. Find ways to do it, and you generally feel better on a daily basis, and you're able to bring your A game to the table consistently.
Indeed. Well, thank you again. So this has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. My name is Brad Giles. You can find me at evolutionpartners.com.au, and we've got a weekly newsletter that you may well be interested in, where we share a whole range of interesting thoughts every week. Kevin, the author again of Your Oxygen Mask First, you can find at lawrenceandco.com, and Kevin has also a weekly newsletter that you may be interested. You can find us at YouTube if you search for the Growth Whisperers as well, if you'd prefer to see our smiling faces. Hope that you've enjoyed the episode, and look forward to chatting to you again next week.